Hello my friends, HM here. Now in this video I'm going to talk about the war that is happening in the Middle East between Israel and also Iran and its proxies. Now that war has been going on ever since the creation of the Israeli state, and it has flared up from time to time and it keeps repeating itself. Basically what is happening is that when the Islamists have gathered enough weapons, they think they can attack Israel and get rid of Israel and eliminate them all. But then Israel kick them back, and then the war is over for a while, but then the Islamists gather new weapons and then the cycle repeats. That's what we are seeing right here. Hamas, Hezbollah gathered a lot of weapons, now they are attacking Israel, and now Israel is attacking back. Now in this video I will not focus on the actual events that are happening. I'll rather focus on the long-term strategy or the endgame for Israel. What can Israel do this time in order for this cycle of war not to repeat, or at least make it less possible that it will repeat in the future? Because I think there are some unique things that has changed in this world. One thing is that Russian army is bogged down in Ukraine, and the other thing is, believe it or not, the advent of artificial intelligence. These two things might actually make a strategy possible that could secure Israel against repeated attacks in the future. If you think that sounds interesting, then keep watching. Now, before we begin, I'd like to say a heartfelt thank you to the many new subscribers I have gotten. I've gotten almost 1,600 new subscribers since my last video dropped, and my channel is now, as you can see, at 6,600 subscribers. That's up from about 600 subscribers 2 months ago, so 11 times growth in 2 months. That's amazing. Thank you very much. I'd also like to say a special thanks to the people who are donating money to my channel, either by clicking this thanks button and then pick a level and click here buy and send, or by joining my channel by clicking here and then pick a level. This is very important for this channel. It's 90% of my income, and it's also very important because YouTube get a little cut of these donations, and that means my channel is promoted more relative to other channels that don't get as many money sent that way. So they will promote this channel and the message I have on this channel, which is a message of freedom and democracy and also rational thinking and scientific method. I think that's important components for making the world better. So if you donate, you are promoting that message. I thought that was important. And with that out of the way, let's get to it. Now, the current status of this war is that we have Israel here, and there's a full-blown war in the Gaza Strip where Hamas is the predominant militant force, and they're fighting Israeli army forces there. And then there's also a full-blown war in South Lebanon where Hezbollah is the main militant group, and they're fighting Israeli forces that has also crossed the border into South Lebanon. But also there are attacks all over Lebanon where Islamists are staying, and also in Syria, Israel is bombarding using air forces and missiles. Now, while Israel is using their air forces to hit the Islamists are also bombarding Israel. In particular, from Gaza, they have been sending rockets into Israel for almost a year. But after fighting for almost a year, Israel has managed to destroy most of these rocket launchers, and they're running out of ammunition in Gaza. So that threat from Gaza has been reduced very much, and to the point where Israelis have moved back to where they live around Gaza on the Israeli side. But up here in Lebanon, rockets are still flying in large numbers into northern Israel, and that has meant that hundreds of thousands of Israelis have not been able to stay in their homes but are refugees in other parts of Israel. Also, rockets have been flying in from Syria, not as many as from South Lebanon, but still. And also Israel has been attacked from Iran and Yemen, and maybe we should change the map here to show that. So down here we have Yemen, and it's almost 2,000 kilometers away from Israel, but Yemen has sent long-range drones and also ballistic missiles towards Israel, and some of them have actually hit Israel, and Israel has retaliated with airstrikes in Yemen that has blown up some of their oil storage installations in their harbors. But these attacks from Yemen has not been very significant. Unlike Iran has made some massive attacks on Israel twice, and let's take a look at that. Now, the first strike that Iran did on Israel that was massive was back in April 2024. And I found the Wikipedia page that documents that. And it said here it happened on 13th of April, where Iran sent around 170 drones. That's slow-flying drones that are easy to shoot down. And also they sent 30 cruise missiles. They are flying at 1,000 kilometers per hour, much harder to shoot down, but really not a big problem for a fighter jet to find them and then shoot them down. And also they sent 120 ballistic missiles towards Israel. Ballistic missiles are a lot harder to shoot down because they're coming in from space, more or less, and they're coming in at like 4,000 kilometers per hour. Much harder to shoot down, and the interceptor missiles you need to use cost a lot more in order to stop these rockets. But let's see what Israel did to respond to that attack. I found the Wikipedia page also for Israel's response to this attack, and you can see it here. It happened 5 days after the Iranian attack. Then the Israeli Air Force launched airstrikes targeting an air defense facility within Iran. And US officials here confirmed at least 3 missiles from Israeli aircraft had struck Iran. And Iran themselves reported that some small explosion had occurred. Israel basically didn't retaliate at all. And perhaps one of the reasons was that Iran's attack on Israel was largely deemed completely unsuccessful. Nearly all of the missiles were shot down before they reached Israel with the help of US and UK, and it didn't really have an effect on Israel. So maybe that's why their retaliation for this attack was minimal. But let's move on. But Iran was not done. They struck Israel again the 1st of October, just a few days ago, and that attack was far more powerful. This time, Iran only used ballistic missiles that are far more difficult to shoot down, and they used a large number of them. I found the Wikipedia source here, and it said on October 1st, Iran launched 181 ballistic missiles at targets on Israel in 2 waves. That is more ballistic missiles launched at any country than ever in history. And what was the result of this attack? The attacks employing these missiles did not appear to have caused extensive damage. 20 to 32 missiles directly hit an area near an Israeli airbase and also damaged a hangar and a taxi airway there. And several others hit another airbase and a school in a nearby town, and then in an area north of Tel Aviv around the headquarters of the Israeli intelligence service Mossad, damaging homes and a restaurant there. Analysts suggested that Iran had better success in saturating Israel's aero defense system during this attack compared to previous attempts, forcing Israeli operators to prioritize the defense of Tel Aviv region over this airbase. I think that's a correct analysis from the air defense expert. It did look like this Israeli air defense system was running out of interceptor missiles. Let's see a video from it. I'll only show you one video, but I think this is the most telling video from this attack. Let's play it. Here we see the missiles, ballistic missiles coming in, and they are definitely hitting something. There are big explosions here, and they're not stopped by any interceptor missiles. So that's why I think this video shows that there are some success with this Iranian attack. Now, media has been banned from reporting anything from these attacks, apart from some situations where it was obvious that it didn't cause much damage. So I haven't seen any videos showing evidence of substantial damage to any Israeli installations, but you can see from this video that there are some explosions, and it would be unlikely that at least some of them did not hit something valuable. I don't know, maybe 5% actually hit something of value to Israel, but Israel also protect their aircraft and valuable stuff inside bunkers. And even though these missiles have like a warhead of 500 kilo, which is a massive warhead, they have to be bunker-busting warhead in order to penetrate these hangars. So I don't know how much damage they will cause. But of course this is a serious attack, and we haven't seen how Israel will respond. But it might actually be that Israel will not respond either much this time, because they have their hands full in Lebanon and also Syria and Gaza, and maybe they are going to spend their rockets and bullets on these areas instead. It will have a bigger effect, I think, for the security of Israel. But we will see. But let's take a look and see what actually started this war. Well, it all started with a Hamas-led attack on Israel last year. And here it says on Wikipedia that reports about this. The attack began early on 7th of October with a barrage of at least 4,300 rockets launched against Israel. And also vehicle transported and paragliders, there's a picture of them here, made it into Israel from Gaza. It says here that 6,000 Gazans breached the border in 119 places and broke into Israel, including 3,800 from the elite Nukba forces, that's Hamas forces, but also 2,200 civilians and other militants participated. So also civilians participated in this slaughter. So what happened? Well, in total, 1,139 people were killed. Of those, 695 were Israeli civilians, and also that included 38 children. They killed children. 71 was foreign nationals, and 373 were members of the security forces. What else happened? Well, they took about 250 Israeli civilians and soldiers back to Gaza as hostages. Some of them were dead, most of them were alive at that time, and that also included 30 children. Now, of those 250 hostages that were taken, about 100 are left in Gaza, and only 60 of those are believed to be still alive. Let's go to the atrocities that have been reported. Here it says that Israeli women and girls, so also children, were reportedly raped, assaulted and mutilated by Hamas militants during this incursion. And here it says, witnesses described the perpetrations using shovels, beheading victims, engaged in rapes, and even playing with severed body parts. The BBC reported that videos of naked and bloodied women filmed by Hamas on the day of the attacks, and also photographs of bodies taken at the sites afterwards, suggest that women were sexually targeted by the attackers. Now, I have seen some of these videos and images. Don't go and watch them. They are absolutely disgusting, and they leave me without any doubt that they were raped, because, you know, their pants were taken down exactly where you would expect a rape to happen. And but they were just gruesome images, and I wish I hadn't seen them, but it happened. What kind of hatred can make people do things like that? Let's dig a little bit into that. Now, I'll give you an example of the kind of hatred that Islamists hold against Jewish people. This guy here, it's an Iranian top commander in this Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. He was killed recently by Israel in a strike on a Beirut bunker where he was participating in a meeting with other Hezbollah members, and he was killed along with a lot of other people. And that's why I found this quote that is pretty typical for what the Islamists are thinking. But he said here, "I have had a dream of destroying Israel since I was 6 years old." So even at childhood, when he was 6 years old, he knew he would destroy Israel, and he just dreamed about it. I'll sacrifice my life on this path. That's a little ironic, because he did sacrifice his life on this path. But I just think it's shocking that even children are brought up to hate other people. That shouldn't happen anywhere in the world. That's not how we create a better world. But it is happening here. People are simply brought up to hate. And that's what we are dealing with here. It's a big problem. Now, to grasp how representative this guy's opinions are among Palestinians, I found this opinion poll that was done on almost 700 people from West Bank and Gaza, all Palestinians, and they were asked this question: how much do you support the military operation carried out by the Palestinian resistance led by Hamas on October 7th? And 60% said they extremely supported it. So they extremely supported the killing of civilians, raping of children and women, and mutilation of Jews. 16% here somewhat supported it, 11% neither support or oppose it, and extremely against, that was 7.3%. That's the right answer. If you're a good person, you should be extremely against indiscriminate killings of civilians and rape of children and women and mutilation of civilians. You should be extremely against it. That's my opinion. So we do have a problem. It's a hate culture. And for those Western politicians who think that we should just have a ceasefire and then we should make peace with each other and, hug each other and exchange flowers, they're totally unrealistic. They live in La La Land. They have lived a life without any hatred or anything, so they think the whole world is like that people are good and that hatred of that level doesn't exist, but it does exist. And there's no way you can have peace between people who hate each other that much. I don't actually think the Jews hate the Muslims that much, but many of the Muslims certainly do hate the Jews at that level. And that's a real problem. And that's why I'm making this video, because I want to see what kind of solutions could actually realistically minimize the spiral of violence that is happening here in the Middle East and that just keeps happening again and again as we go back in time. It's like a never-ending conflict, and we need some kind of solutions that are realistic. Now, before we go into some speculation about what's going to happen next and how could we possibly end this spiral of violence in the Middle East, it's important to take a look at what happened in the past, because the past seems to keep repeating itself, and we need to have that context in order to find a solution for how not to repeat the past. So let's take a look at that past. So I found the Wikipedia page that described the last time Israel invaded Lebanon, and it's called the Second Israeli Invasion of Lebanon, and it began in the 6th of June 1982. So apparently there has been a first time, then this one in 82 was a second time, and now we have a third time where Israel invades Lebanon. And why did that happen? Well, it happened because a Palestinian militant organization at that time called PLO was operating in South Lebanon, and they were firing rockets into Israel, and there were casualties on both sides because Israel also fired back. But they got fed up with these attacks and thought it was necessary to try to disarm this PLO movement, so they invaded. And let's take a look at the map that shows this invasion. Here we have Israel, here we have Golan Heights, and over here we have Syria with their capital Damascus. And here we have Lebanon with Beirut, their capital. And Israel basically started this invasion, and a couple of months later they had taken Beirut and also the Damascus-Beirut highway and the area around here. It was not bloody compared to what's happening in Ukraine. I think in total Israel lost some 600 soldiers, and that's half of what Russia loses every day. And it took a couple of months, and then they simply took control of this area and began to dismantle the infrastructure that PLO had and all their ammunition stores and weapons. And also Syria tried to help the PLO in this attack, and they lost pretty much the entire air force that was shot down by Israeli air force. And probably they also lost hundreds of tanks. So it was a fiasco for Syria and was a fiasco for PLO. So what happens in the months after that defeat? PLO and Syria began quarreling about who to blame for this disaster. And it ended with Syria no longer wanting anything to do with PLO, and they cut the weapons supply to PLO. And that meant that PLO was forced to withdraw completely out of Lebanon. From that moment on, Syria began, and Iran that backs Syria began to support some other Islamist movements. And later on that turned into Hamas and also Hezbollah, that currently are the main militant organizations for the war that is happening right now. But let's take a little bit deeper look into what actually happened and how this conflict ended. Now, Wikipedia also have a pretty good description of how the conflict ended here. Basically, the PLO left Lebanon. Israeli stayed in this occupation zone all the way up to Beirut and Damascus highway, and they stayed there, dismantled all the weapon stores and stuff that they had. But they also came increasingly under attack from Islamic militants that began attacking them in South Lebanon, launching guerrilla attacks at Israeli positions and also pro-Israeli Lebanese militias. Several hundred Israelis were killed that way, and also these militias. In particular, there was a headquarter that Israeli forces had in Tyre that was attacked twice with hundreds of casualties. So Israel decided 3 years later, that would be in June 1985, to withdraw from most of this area and back to a small land between Israel and Lebanon, and they call that a security zone. But Hezbollah, that was fully organized at that time, continued their attacks on Israeli troops in that security zone. And what happened was that Israel was in this security zone all the way into year 2000, and then they also pulled out of that completely and all the way back to Israel's borders. And then the conflict kind of ended. There was far more peace after that. But what happened was that Hezbollah started to build up and plan for the next big attack on Israel. And they started to dig tunnels and make new weapons depots and so forth, basically preparing for the war that is happening right now. And we can also see what happened in Gaza. Here I found a Wikipedia page describing a little bit about what happened in the Gaza Strip at that time. The Israeli government decided in 2005 that they would withdraw all the Jewish settlements there. There were about 8,000 Jewish people in 21 settlements. And they would also withdraw their occupation forces in the Gaza Strip completely, because the strategy was that if they get the territory completely to rule by themselves, then perhaps they'll cool down and become more good neighbors with the Israeli state. But the exact opposite happened. They became even more radicalized. So I found here a relevant webpage on Wikipedia. It's a history of Hamas. And down here, timeline, we can see what happened. Yasser Arafat, this guy here, who was the leader of the Palestinian people for a very long time, he died in 2004 in October. And then the Palestinian territories at the West Bank and Gaza was holding a presidential election to find a new leader. And it became this Abbas here that we have a picture of that was elected. But Hamas, that has grown in influence at the time in Gaza, they boycotted this election. They didn't want anything to do with elections because it's an Islamist organization. They don't recognize any kind of democracy. They just decide stuff. So of course they boycotted it. But still this Mahmoud Abbas here became the new leader of the Palestinians. And then the Israelis, they withdrew from Gaza here also in 2005. And then stuff happened. What really happened was that in June 2007, Hamas was so strong that they basically took over control of Gaza, and the Fatah part of the Palestinian administration, they were ousted. They killed all who didn't swear loyalty to Hamas. They were just killed. And that was the end of Fatah in Gaza. And since 2007, Hamas has had complete control over the Gaza Strip. And they basically implemented Sharia law with child marriages, executions of anybody who were against them, and also executions of, if you are LGBT, you get executed. If you try to convert away from Islam, you get executed. Basically a Sharia society. And also they prepared for war with Israel by simply using the money that they took from international donations. They took a big share of that and used it for building tunnels and making weapons and importing weapons, smuggling them in from Egypt, what they couldn't make themselves inside Gaza. And all the way up to today, they prepared for this attack on Israel. That's what happened. So obviously not a great strategy for Israel to pull out and leave control to the Palestinians themselves, because what happens is that the most violent group will take power, because the more violent you are, the easier it is to grab power. And anybody who wants to do it democratically, they'll be killed. And that's what happened. But let's move on. So how has Hamas managed since they started this war 1 year ago? Well, Hamas has lost a lot of their leaders. One of the leaders they have lost is this Ismail Haniyeh, that was a top political leader. We have a picture of him right here. I actually made a video about how he was assassinated because I thought mainstream media got it completely wrong, but it was not a very popular video. And at that time, I also only had like 600 subscribers. Maybe that was why I didn't get any attention. But that's a little sidestep. Anyway, he has been killed. And I have another... Forget about that for now. That's the Hezbollah organization. They've all been killed, but I'll come back to that. Over here, we have an organizational chart of Hamas. And you can see many of their leaders has also been killed by Israel. everyone here who has a cross over them have been killed. Their top military leader here, who's also now appointed the political leader, he hasn't been killed yet, but I'm pretty sure Israel is not stopping this war until this guy is taken out as well. And there are also other guys here that hasn't been killed, but most have been killed. And then also what has happened is that there's a land strip of only 100 meters between Gaza and Egypt. Now, it's called the Philadelphia Corridor. The idea was that Egypt should guard that Philadelphia Corridor and prevent any smuggle of weapons and stuff into Gaza. But Egypt has not guarded it at all, and Hamas has been able to build lots of tunnels into Egypt and smuggle whatever they wanted in and out. And Egypt has made a lot of money on that trade because they, of course, get a cut of it. They must know that all this trade is happening. They can't just let this happen without knowing. Of course, they know it. So what has happened is that on May 2024, Israel took control of this Rafah crossing and also the entire Philadelphia corridor. And then ever since, Israel has been looking for these tunnels, and when they find them, they blow them up. So I think by now, Hamas is completely cut off from new deliveries of weapons. They're basically surrounded. They have lost most of their leaders, and many of their troops have been killed, and they're running out of ammunition and weapons. Now that has meant that Israel has pulled back many of their forces because they no longer need a strong force to bring the remaining areas of Gaza under their control. So what has happened now is that Israel has focused on the other side of where they are getting attacked, namely the Lebanese border where Hezbollah has attacked them. So how has it gone for Hezbollah in this war? As I said, the war has shifted from Gaza to Lebanon with Hezbollah instead, because Hamas is likely only like 25% of the fighting force they used to be a year ago, and Israel don't simply need to spend a lot of troops controlling that situation down there. So they've sent many of their troops up to the border to Lebanon, and now they also started a ground invasion. And as you can see on this map here, all the blue spots are Israeli airstrikes and rocket and artillery strikes on Hezbollah positions here in South Lebanon. And all the red dots here are Hezbollah's rockets firing back on Israeli positions. So how has it gone for Hezbollah? I have this organigram map showing the Hezbollah organization, and as you can see, the entire top of Hezbollah has now been eliminated. That started, this is from September 28 here in 2024. It started really there by a big strike on a bunker that had nearly all these people. And they got almost all of them at that meeting. And then they appointed new leaders in Hezbollah. They appointed this Hassam Sharif. I think it was a brother or a cousin of their former leader. And he got eliminated here on the 4th of October, just a few days ago, along again with newly appointed top leaders. And then I found another video that I saw on the 6th of October, that was just yesterday, where they reported that the third leader Hezbollah had appointed, apparently called Ibrahim Amin, now he's also gone and has been eliminated. So Hezbollah is losing their top brass very fast. Israel has definitely stepped up the attacks. They have been at war with Hezbollah at the Israeli-Lebanese border ever since it started there on the 7th of October last year, and exchanging fire and rockets. But now it's like 10 or 20 times more intense in terms of the number of bombs and stuff that is happening, and in terms of number of people that are dying. And then what else has happened? Well, Israel has not only killed Hezbollah's top guys, but they've also killed Iranian guys that were attending meetings in Lebanon with Hezbollah. This guy there is believed to have been killed because there has been no word from him since the first Hezbollah leader there was killed. He was believed to be in that bunker in a meeting with him. And this guy is the absolute top guy in the Iranian army, in one of the most important army corps that they have in Iran. And then there was this guy that I talked about earlier in the video who dreamed about destroying and eliminating Israel since he was 6 years old, which is a typical view for the Islamists. And then we had this story about pagers. Hezbollah commanders were using using pagers and also walkie-talkies because their leader had told them they shouldn't use telephones. Those too dangerous. Mossad would spy on these telephones, and Mossad had also previously used explosives in cell phones that had blown up leaders. But Mossad, the Israeli intelligence service, also managed to infiltrate, you could say, the buying chain of Hezbollah, and then they sold them pagers and walkie-talkies that had been changed in production, so they also contained explosives, and then they activated all these explosives by calling all these Hezbollah operatives up, and they have wounded thousands of Hezbollah commanders and also killed a lot of them. And first they did it on September 17th with the pagers. And then you would think that Hezbollah was worried about maybe they also got to our walkie-talkies, but no, they kept using the walkie-talkies, and the day after, all the walkie-talkies blew up and even more people were killed. And also Israel had put explosives into electric equipment that Hezbollah uses. Lebanon has a very weak power grid. The grid really doesn't function. It's only on for a few hours per day. It's a failed state, basically, Lebanon. So many have solar power and also generators up, so they need some power electronics to have that functioning. And Israel had also sold power electronics transformers to Hezbollah, and these power stations also blew up. And then, of course, in the last couple of weeks, there has been lots of pictures and videos on X and elsewhere showing Israeli airstrikes on Hezbollah's weapon storage depots that they have stored inside the middle of Beirut in a populated city. They thought that if they had their weapon storage in bunkers below civilian buildings and also mosques, then Israel wouldn't target them. But what Israel has done is that they just announced an hour before they are going to target these buildings. Now we are going to target that specific building, and then they tell all civilians, get at least 500 meters away from these buildings because we're going to level them. And they have done that. And of course the civilian buildings go down, but so has these bunkers. And there's lots of ammunition in these bunkers, so it has created some enormous explosions. If you want to see these videos, you can go to my Twitter account or X account, and there's a link below this video. There I post all these videos, but I cannot show you these videos here on this YouTube channel because YouTube won't allow it. So that's pretty much how it's going for Hezbollah. But now let's talk about what the endgame is for Israel and how they could stop this cycle of war from continuing in the Middle East. Let's talk about that strategy now. Okay, so Israel has stated that they have three objectives with this war. One is to get all of the hostages back from Gaza, dead or alive. One is to eliminate all Hamas fighters in Gaza. And the other one is to get the Israeli people who are living here, who has been displaced by the Hezbollah rockets, get them back so they can live in their own houses. Now, how long does the Israeli army have to push Hezbollah forces away from the Israeli border in order to make it very difficult for Hezbollah to target Israel in northern Israel? They actually have to push them 100 kilometers away from the border. And I know that because, let me bring in a spreadsheet. I'm famous on this channel for having spreadsheets. I have this spreadsheet here. Here I have all the weapons in the world, more or less. I've collected them, and I've collected some data on them, when they are made, how much they cost, what their range is, the speed, time to hit target, all kind of things, warhead, how many are built and how many are in active service and stuff like that. Here we have heavy-duty artillery. That has typically a range of 25 kilometers. Then you have some state-of-the-art artillery systems that can bring the fire range up to 40 kilometers. Then you have some special shells that have base bleed that can bring the range up to 55 kilometers. And then also some rocket-propelled shells that can take it all the way up to 70 kilometers. Then there's also rocket-propelled artillery. Most of that is affordable only has a range of between 40 to 90 kilometers. If you want to go to a range that is over 100 kilometers, then the weapon starts to get a lot more costly. There's also, of course, drones, and I have them as well in this table. I have short-range drones below 25 kilometers. They are very, very affordable, all the way down to $500 each. And the most expensive ones are like $20,000 in that short range. And then we have mid-range drones from 25 to 100 kilometers. They're also very affordable. And then we have longer range drones over 100 kilometers. Very, as you can see here, this is the prices in US dollars. Very expensive weapons. It also gives Israel time. If there's a 100 kilometer buffer zone, it gives Israel time to sound the air alert so that people have time to get in bunkers and be safe before something is hitting. So Israel really has to push Hezbollah 100 kilometers away. Let's see how much that is on the map. And I have a map that shows that. So here we have Lebanon, here we have Beirut, and we have Damascus, and Israel is down here. Let's bring on another map here. The good thing about this map is that it can make some circles, and what I have done here is making some circles with a radius of 100 kilometers, and I put these circles inside of Israel at the border to Lebanon just to see the distance that Israel will actually have to push into Lebanon in order to move Hezbollah back. And look at this. From Israel to Beirut, it's only 73 kilometers. From Israel to Damascus, it's 71 kilometers. Now, Damascus is in Syria, and hopefully Israel doesn't need to invade Syria because Syria will prevent Hezbollah from shooting from Syrian territory. But of course, if Hezbollah just start firing stuff from Syria, then this war will have to be expanded to Syria. But I'll come back to that. Now, it's not just done by expanding the territory to 100 kilometers into Lebanon. There are some problems because 41% of Lebanon's population, they're Christians, and they actually live in this coastal area predominantly south of Tripoli and then up to around here and then down here. I have another map that can show it. This is an ethnic composition map of Lebanon. This is all of Lebanon. The red areas is where the Christians are living. And as you can see, and here we have Tripoli, and here we have Beirut, and you can see the Christians are living here. The problem is if Israel just takes this area here to north of Beirut in order to secure themselves, then what will happen is that the Islamists will simply kill all the Christians who live here. So they have to include this area with the Christians or they will be killed. Of course, the Christians have their own militia that are protecting this area, but if all the Islamists are pressed up here, then they will just start attacking them until they win this territory and drive all the Christians out. So what do I expect will happen? And what do I think Israel's endgame is with this incursion into Lebanon? Well, I think it's a lot more ambitious than they have told the Biden administration. They just said, oh, we're just making a little bit of an incursion here into Lebanon, don't worry. But I think actually that it's far more ambitious because if they have to solve their own problems, getting their own citizens out of harm's way from most of Hezbollah's rockets and artillery and missiles and drones, then they have to, as I said, go 100 kilometers into Lebanon. And also, if they should include this Christian area, then they need to stop south of Tripoli and then take this area here that I have highlighted with a blue border. That is all Lebanon, but this is a new Lebanon that I think Israel will create together with the Christian militias and also the Muslims, both Shia and Sunni Muslims that live here, and also Druze that live here. They are a special kind of Muslims that are pretty friendly with the Jews and don't have any issues. But I think a new country will be created here. You could call it South Lebanon. And also I think another country up here in north will be created. That will be North Lebanon, and I have shown that by creating the red border here. That will be the Islamist paradise where they can have it all by themselves and rule with brutal Sharia law. But it will also give Israel and the people who live in this area an opportunity to deport or divorce themselves of anybody who lives in this territory who is an Islamist. Because if there are Islamists living in this territory, even a few, what they will do is that they will become militants and they'll do terrorist attacks and there'll not be security for all the people who live here. So they need this divorce strategy that will be able to create lasting peace. If you are living as grown-ups and you get married, normally for love, hopefully for love, and that love disappears completely and the only thing that's left is just mutual hatred of each other, then it's a very good thing to get divorced and just start over and try your luck another place. That's how we solve that problem and basically create a better life for both parties. The same can be done with a state where there are cultural differences between people that are so large that you cannot live together anymore. I have to say this, there are Western politicians that I say they live in La La Land. They think that peace is possible, that you can coexist and live and just hug each other and exchange flowers. They don't have a clue about how deep the hatred is. It's impossible. The only thing that's possible is divorce. That's the most low violence strategy that is possible. You could imagine another more violent strategy. You could imagine that you do like the Islamists do. They just execute everybody who is not an Islamist. They execute those who are against the Islamist rule. They execute LGBT people. That's far more violent, and we should not do that. But of course, Israel or the Christian militias and whoever will rule this area could also implement such a violent strategy, but hopefully not. It will come to that. It's much better and far less violent simply to go apart in order to solve this problem. That's why I call it a divorce strategy. The problem is, you could say, Henrik, how would you even implement a divorce strategy like that? Could you find the Islamists and then send them over probably an active front line here? No, that would be dangerous because people are shooting at each other and you will have no man's land and there will be minefields and so forth. But fortunately, there is a coastline in this situation. And you could make a safe deportation of people simply by putting people on a barge with some empty oil drums underneath that keep it floating, and then a wood construction on top, and then a cheap used engine to propel it. You could put them on a barge here south of Tripoli, and that barge will sail out and sail north and then will sail into a beach on Tripoli, and then it'll blow up the engine so they can't sail back. It could be operated by inertial navigation, so you can't jam it. If there's somebody who don't want this divorce or deportation to the other side, it can't be stopped because you can use inertial navigation. This is an easy job to do. So it'll be one-way barges that sail one way and will go to the other side, and will be safe because they don't go over an active front line. That could be how it was done. Now, there are a few things we also need to consider. For instance, should any Jewish person or family be allowed to settle in this South Lebanon area? Absolutely not. If that was allowed, then the Islamists would just have an incentive to start firing rockets into this territory. But if it's only populated with Christians and other Muslims, then the propaganda war cannot be won by the Islamists if they are bombarding this area, because then they are bombarding Christians and other Muslims, and that will not look good in the, you could say, in the world opinion. So they'll have far less incentives to bomb this area if there are zero Jews in this area, and therefore I think Jews should be barred from living there. There's also another problem. How would you actually find out who is an Islamist and who's not an Islamist? You would need to create a surveillance society or a police state, basically, and you need to use AI. That's why I said in my introduction to the video that AI will be part of this. In China, they have already done it. They have also done it in some countries in the Middle East. They have set up cameras everywhere, and these cameras are feeding data centers that are then face IDing everybody who's walking in the public space, so that the state have a record of everybody who's walking around in public spaces and who they meet, who they talk to, and where they are at any given point in time. This is live. It's going on 7/24, so non-stop. And also, this is something that couldn't have been done just 3 years ago because face recognition didn't work very well. Now it works like 100%. These cameras will 100% ID you. And you need to create a profile on every citizen alive and who is registered to live in this territory. And also any tourist who come in will need to be face ID'd and have fingerprints taken, perhaps even DNA samples taken and an iris scan, so that there's absolutely full knowledge of who's who in this society. The problem is that the Islamists could dig tunnels under the front line and then smuggle in terrorists that will then execute an attack. But if you have this system with cameras everywhere that are monitored by an AI system that can ID people, then you will immediately notice if somebody is inside this territory that shouldn't be there, and then you can send a squad team to take care of that problem. It's not something I really want to happen, but it's a solution to something that otherwise have no solution. And I think it will happen. I think even here in the Western world, eventually we'll get this surveillance society where there's cameras everywhere and our every movement outside of our own home will be registered. You can even have AI do We read the lips, so it can also make transcripts of what people are talking to each other about. Now, if you have that kind of information on record, it will be hard to see how you could make a successful terrorist attack or any crime for that sake. I think that's something that will happen. It's not something I'm too happy about, but we don't live in a world where we can pick and choose between what's going to happen. Normally, it's a pick between bad, really bad, and ultra bad. And then we just pick the least bad solution. It's not that we have a choice between good and bad. No, often it's just a choice between different levels of bads. That's why I mentioned this AI intelligence stuff in my introduction, because that has opened up a whole new world of monitoring people and preventing crime, including terrorism. Now, I said Israel had 3 goals, and one was to bring their displaced people back in their own homes, and the 2 others was, one, get the hostages back from Gaza, and also to eliminate completely the Hamas organization. How can these 2 goals be achieved? We already have the solution that we have talked about here. You create a surveillance society where you monitor where everybody are, and you monitor them so you figure out who are the Islamists and who are the people who just want to live in freedom and democracy and mutual respect for one another. Those who are the Islamists, they get divorced or deported to this area here up in North Lebanon, to the Caliphate where they really belong and where they want to be, because they're only Islamists up here. And what is left over time in Gaza and also the West Bank is only people who want freedom, democracy, and living mutual respect, and also have economic growth and prosperity. Now, if that has happened over time, say 10 years, then I don't see any problems with giving these 2 territories an independent state status so they can get a Palestinian state for these areas. But they have to be brought to a situation where Israel no longer feels threatened by these areas. And then I think they will get a Palestinian state, as they deserve, because they have been fighting for it for so long. And they'll actually get 2 Palestinian states, because they'll also get this Islamist hellhouse up here. There'll also be a Palestinian state eventually, because when you deport a lot of Islamists, most of these Islamists will be Palestinians. Then the Palestinians will actually get control of this area. Although there'll also be a lot of Shia Muslims that are not Palestinians, that are either born in Lebanon or that come from Syria. But we could actually end up with 2 new independent states that are both Palestinians and that will not pose any more a threat for Israel. I think that's a pretty good solution. It's a win-win. It should be for all parties. And I think that's what will happen. I kind of hope it is what will happen. I think the best we can hope for is such a solution. All other alternatives I can think of are far worse and far more violent. So that's why I've thought about it. I've given it a lot of thought, actually, because this is one of the biggest problems in the world and has to be solved, this problem. And I think this is a way to do it. Now, I also mentioned in the intro to this video that the situation in Ukraine, where there's a war with Russia, that might also help Israel to solve their problems once and for all with their security. The thing is, Syria is still very close to Israel, and what if the Islamists start shooting missiles and stuff from the Syrian part of the border into Israel? Then Israel will not have solved their problems, then they will still have to flee their homes in that part of Israel. Well, then Israel could also invade that part of Syria and create this new country here. I've set up a zone here. Let's move it in here so we can see it. I call it South Syria. It could be invaded by Israel. Normally, Israel would have no chance of doing that because Russia would just send air forces and all kind of forces in to help the Syrians fight off the Israelis from taking this territory here. But now Russia is fixed in Ukraine in a war, and they cannot send troops or help to Syria to deal with this. And I think that means that Israel is in a situation where they could also take this area if they wanted to. And I'm not sure Israel would want to do it because this will be difficult. Damascus is a huge city. There's 2.5 million people living there. Beirut is just a small city. There is like 600,000 people. So taking this militarily will be a lot harder. Why have I made such a big area here? Because what is this territory for? Well, if you have to take this area here, you need to have a defensible border. It has to go here from Lebanon and then all the way up here. Here we have Damascus. Right here, if we zoom in, we can see there's a natural defense with some lakes and river systems. Normally you put a border there. And why have I done this other thing here? why I put a line down here and have a border here. It's because this area here is basically a desert. Nobody lives there. It's a barren area, and it's easy to put up a border that is easy to defend, and it has to be easy to defend. There's no vegetation, it's bone dry and nothing grows there. So it's only rocks and sand. And again, the solution would be the same thing, a police state where everybody are monitored so they can find out who is the Islamist, and then they get deported here to this Islamist part of Lebanon, or they get deported on the other side of this border. Now this border will be somewhat longer, so there must be ways to get people safely over this front line without getting shot at. So that could be a solution also for this area. There are a few things that indicate that maybe Israel is thinking of doing this, and I think I should just mention them. There is this here. This guy here, Israel was attacking on September 30. They was attacking a mansion here where there was a meeting, and this man is President Assad's brother, President Assad of Syria, his brother. He's living there. It's his mansion. Maybe it was an attempt to kill him and everybody else who was in this mansion. And maybe they got to him. I haven't heard any confirmation of who they killed, but they killed somebody. And the other thing that might indicate that Israel is more ambitious about what they're going to do with Syria is this up here. It was an attack that Israel made on a Russian airbase inside Syria. They put 30 missiles on it. There are some videos that I won't play, but it got pretty much destroyed. And normally Israel doesn't attack at all the Russians in Syria. They have kind of an agreement that you don't bother us, we don't bother you. But there's more at stake now for Israel. They have to create security for their own state. And maybe Israel say, no, hell, we are going to take it all, including Damascus, in order to create a lasting peace and in order to create absolutely zero opportunity for any Islamists to easily target Israeli territory in the future. But okay, I think now that my video is plenty long, it had to be long because this is a hard problem to solve, create peace, lasting peace in the Middle East. And I've thought a lot about it. I really hope you like this video. I'm interested to see what my comments are. I'm sure I'll get a lot of hate comments and I'll delete them. I won't accept them. I'm trying here to do some good. I'm not trying to do bad things. Okay, but that was my video, and I will continue to make videos that goes a little deeper and that gives situational context of all the things that is happening in this world. And if you want to support my channel, of course give it a like, subscribe, and also if you really want to support my channel, click these 3 dots here and then send some money to me so I can pay my bills. And also if you really want to help my channel, you click this join button and then you select a fixed fee every month to donate to the channel. And you can always stop that if you think my videos are not good enough, then just cancel it. I only have one thing left, and that is to wish you a great life in freedom and democracy. Goodbye.